Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Shabnam Lutfi and I will be your moderator for tonight. There are quite a number of people that I need to thank, and so if you could just bear with me, I'll go through this list as fast as possible. First, I want to thank the library and Tom Carls for providing us with this wonderful venue and for working with us to put the forum together. I also want to thank Madison City IT for live streaming this event and providing sound and audio. I would like to acknowledge and thank our co-sponsoring organizations for all of their hard work and contributions to this forum. They are Our Wisconsin Revolution, Dane County, the ACLU People Power, Affordable Housing Action Alliance, Family Farm Defenders, the First Unitarian Society, Social Justice Ministry, Indivisible Madison, the Peregrine Forum, Madison Area Bus Advocates, Madison Bikes, the Wisconsin Network for Peace, Justice, and Sustainability, Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice, and 350 Madison Climate Action Team. If you would like to join any of those organizations, we do have clipboards. Feel free to add your email address, check the organization that you'd like to join. A very quick word about Our Wisconsin Revolution. Dane County, we have two goals this year. One is fair democracy, and that's about getting automatic voter registration passed and also eliminating gerrymandering. Our second goal is building bridges and bridging the divide, and that's in our community, but also Madison to Dane County and Dane County to the rest of the state. So that's a great group to join. On to the candidates. Tonight, to my immediate left, we have Maurice. Next to him is Satya Rhodes-Conway, Paul Soglin, Raj Shukla, Nick Hart, and Toriana Petaway. So thank you to each of you for participating. It takes courage, commitment, dedication, persistence to put yourself out there. And we are lucky as Madisonians to have these wonderful candidates wanting to serve. I also want to acknowledge the candidates' family members, because whether you chose to or not, you are part of the campaign team, and more household responsibilities are falling on your shoulders. Please stand to be recognized. And I want to thank the campaign managers and the volunteers and the canvassers and the hosts of meet and greets who open up their doors to strangers so that these guys can get their message out. Thank you guys for all the hard work you do. You knock on doors in the winter, in the snow, in the rain, meeting people. Dogs sometimes are jumping at you. It's a lot of work. And thank you to everybody who's here tonight for caring about democracy, for spending your night and your evening with us. We hope that this forum will help you as voters to make informed decisions. I also ask that once you have decided on a candidate to support, to please contribute to their campaign. Financially would be great. Yard signs don't pay for themselves. Mailers don't pay for themselves. Campaign managers deserve a living wage. So give a little if that's what you can give, or give generously. Tonight's questions were submitted by our sponsoring organizations, and no one has seen them all but me. Many questions overlapped, and so for the sake of time, we have tried to coordinate and consolidate questions into one. I will email all the candidates the questions so that if you do want to follow up with the organizations, you can. They'll be sent to you as they were originally written. And with that, we will begin our forum with each candidate to give a 2-minute opening statement. Timekeepers are at the front. A yellow card means you have 30 seconds. A red card means you have time is up. We do have timers, but I do say if you got a red card, feel free to finish your sentence. Yeah, do that. And then we will ask a series of questions where each candidate has 2 minutes to respond. We will end the forum with 2 minutes as a closing, and there might be 1 or 2 questions where we'll just have a lightning mood, one minute for those. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Maurice for his opening statement, Mo, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Shabnam. Thank you to all of you for coming out here today. Thanks to all the sponsors and organizers for making this possible. My name is Mo Cheeks, and I love this city. I love Madison. It's an awesome place to live and to raise a family, and yet we all know that that's not true for everyone. In fact, most commonly, it's not true for people that look like me. I'm running for mayor of Madison to directly take on these challenges of this persistent reputation that we've developed as a tale of two cities. I'm running for mayor to ensure that Madison is a more inclusive, more innovative, and more safe place for everyone who chooses to call this place home. As an alder on the city council, representing the most diverse district in the city, from Nakoma to Allied Drive and everything in between, as a minority business leader in this city, as an advocate for our kids and a past tutor in our schools, and frankly, as a father, these issues are personal to me. Growing up as the oldest of three boys in a union household, my dad taught me two things. One, the importance of hard work, and second, that in order to accomplish anything meaningful, we have to be able to work together as a unit. In this moment in time, we need a mayor who has a sense of urgency to take on these challenges. We need a mayor who's going to work collaboratively to bring our community together in order to address the realities of our city. I am ready for that job, and I ask for your support on February 19th. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here tonight, and thanks to Shabnam and OWR and the very long list of co-hosts, a number of organizations that I'm fond of and admire the work that you do. So thanks for coming together to make this happen rather than each having your own one of these. My name is Satya Rhodes-Conway, and I'm running for mayor here in Madison because everyone should have the opportunity to thrive. And that means that we need to work on a set of critical issues: affordable housing, rapid transit, racial equity, and being prepared for the impacts of climate change, among other things. I moved to Madison almost 20 years ago now for an internship, and it took about a month for me to fall in love with the city. I remember vividly walking down State Street and thinking, I never want to go back to LA. And I talked my way into a job and, eventually worked up to buying a modest home in the Eakin Park neighborhood where I live with my partner, Amy. But I fell in love with the city, and I've been here ever since. I spent 6 years serving on the Madison City Council, representing District 12, East Hyde Warner Park. And I have been on the Food Policy Council, which meets right here in this room since 2013. I'm a member of the Oscar Mayer Strategic Assessment Committee. And my day job at UW is to run the Mayor's Innovation Project, which is a national learning network for mayors and their senior staff focused on equity, sustainability, and democracy. So I work with mayors all over the country on the issues that we'll be talking about tonight. I believe I have the experience and vision to lead Madison, and I ask for your vote on February 19th. Thank you.
Paul Soglin?
Are we live now? There we go. Thank you. So within the last few months, the Brookings Institute did an evaluation of America's 100 largest cities. And they found that there were just 11 who had shown significant economic progress over the recent years. Economic progress that was inclusive, that covered all races, people of all ethnic backgrounds. Madison was one of those 11. During the course of this evening and the course of the campaign, we can get into some of the technical issues that got us there and will take us into the future. Things like formulating financing for affordable housing. But there's also some very important process things that we have to institutionalize within this community as we go forward. We have to look at the citizen appointments to committees and make sure that they're diverse, not just in terms of race and ethnic background, but also in terms of income and the geographic parts of the city. And we shouldn't be making those appointments to city committees of people who don't live in the city of Madison. I think that's really critical because involvement has to come from our folks. We have to look at things like moving the discussion out of City Hall, having the discussion in the neighborhoods, in community buildings. We have to look at the discussion accessible in terms of providing transportation, and as we have with some of the mayor's neighborhood conferences, childcare. That's how you make a community accessible. And then there's the issue of voting. We've had to take on the restrictions of Scott Walker and what he did with the Republican legislature and Donald Trump to suppress the vote, but we set records last November, and we will thwart their efforts to stop people from voting. Thank you.
Shukla.
Madison, we are what we do. My name is Raj Shukla. I'm the son of immigrants who showed me every day what hard work could mean for your life and who showed me every day what building a strong community could mean for your family and the family of the people that you love. I joined this race as a political newcomer because I feel like right now we are in a moment in history. A moment in history that asks each of us to do all we can to bring this community together and to think bigger, to deal with some of the challenges that we're facing. I'm a newcomer to politics. I am not a newcomer to leadership. I chair the city's Sustainable Madison Committee, which led the city to commit to 100% renewable energy. I am the executive director of a statewide water policy group that asked me to set a vision, that asked me to lead a talented team. It asked me to make the difficult decisions that you have to make every day for the well-being of your colleagues, for the well-being of your members, for the well-being of the communities we serve. And we have difficult decisions in front of us. Housing is increasingly unaffordable for too many people. Will we have the courage to follow the guidance of the Obama administration and look at how we can modernize our zoning rules? We have transportation systems that are broken for too many people in our community. Will we have the courage to start viewing transportation as something all of us should benefit from and not just a luxury that some people can afford and others can't? And we have deep racial divisions, social divisions in this community that we have an opportunity to address if we have the courage and the vision to look at things like early childhood education for all children in Madison. We are what we do, Madison, and we can make a sustainable, equitable, vibrant city for all if we just do it together. Thanks.
Nick Hart.
How was everyone? That was delightfully pathetic. How is you guys good? Everyone's all right. I'm Nick Hart. I'm the comedian who's running, and it's been widely reported that because I'm a comedian that this is a joke. I take joking very seriously as a comedian. So it's municipal politics here in Madison that are the joke, and I say that because only 10 to 20% of people in Madison vote in municipal politics. So I'm here to do that because there's no one in here is going to vote for me, although my campaign manager says, no, don't say that. You guys aren't, the people that are voting for me are all sitting on a bar stool watching the game, and there's a lot of them. And I just trying to remind them the day before. But in serious and honesty, I think everything that's going to be discussed, we need to keep in mind all the issues that we're discussing, that the most marginalized and what's the other word? Marginalized people are going to be the most affected by the issues that we're discussing. So keeping that in mind while we discuss this. That's all my time. I don't need 2 minutes. You guys good?
Toriana Pedaway.
Good evening. Thank you for being here this evening. And my name is Toriana Pedaway. I am your next mayor for the city of Madison. And why am I running for mayor? 26 years ago, I moved here to Madison from San Diego, California. My father is a retired military man who is now deceased. He died in May of this year from stage 4 cancer. And when we moved here to Madison, one of the things that I learned is the word diversity. And as your racial equity coordinator in the city of Madison running for mayor, that was one of the things that always gave me this visceral effect. Every time I heard the word diversity in this community, I literally had a very negative reaction. As a woman of color in this community, that word does not sit very well with me because it does not carry what it actually means, and it's actually a paper exercise in this community. Why am I running for mayor? Because I want to get away from paper exercises. I want to get away in our policies and our actual procedures of paper exercises. I want to lead the city with real actions and affordable housing or housing affordability and retransforming our transit for the communities that need it the most, shared prosperity and small business development. Because diversity just don't mean black and white. It means so many other things for our communities when you don't have public safety, right? For you as residents in this community. Because when you don't have your basic needs, public safety becomes an issue for all of us. I'm running for mayor as the only candidate with the experience that can really transform this community with real transformative solutions. That's why you vote for me, your next mayor for the city of Madison.
Thank you. Let's get a round of applause for the candidates. The first two questions have to do with transportation. We're going to start with Mo. And the first question was submitted by Madison Bikes. Research shows that there's a large proportion of the population that is interested in biking for transportation. They may bike on the Southwest Path or during Ride the Drive, but they do not feel safe and comfortable on the busy roads, and they do not feel safe on painted bike lanes that are next to cars. How are you going to create a connected network of bike facilities in Madison that is safe and comfortable and serves people of all ages and of all abilities?
That's an awesome question. Thank you to the submitter. So Madison is in a position right now where we have actually an extremely high percentage of bike ridership. Something like 10% of our modal transportation in Madison is by bike, which is remarkable, particularly in the north where we know that it gets plenty cold. And yet we know that there's another 60% of sort of interested folks that they're not considered sort of strong bike riders. These are the folks that would be interested in bike riding, as Shabnam said, but are hesitant a little bit. We know that the way that we get those folks to ride bike more often, which is going to be important as we try to reduce congestion and reduce the use of automobiles, is to connect paths. As someone who represents an extremely diverse district on the city council, I know that actually speaking of Southwest Bike Path is really easy to get onto from some areas, and we know that it's an incomplete solution depending on where you want to go, whether you want to get downtown to the other side of the Capitol, or if you want to get to a job on the far west side. There are plenty of incomplete streets, and so incomplete bike and ped paths. So in order for us to get better at that, the answer is simply we need to be completing bike and ped paths, and that needs to be a priority. If we're going to make it easier for people, we have to invest in that as a priority.
Thank you. Satya, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to the bikies for that question. If we are going to address climate change, which we have to do in the next decade, then part of our solution has to be reducing emissions from our transportation sector. And biking is part of that solution because it's at least carbon emissions free. And so we have to make it possible for folks of all ages and abilities to feel comfortable using bikes as a form of transportation, but frankly also walking and using transit. And so the three modes need to be connected to each other. Madison's a platinum biking city, and we need to, but that's not good enough, right? We need to be increasing our mode share, even though we have a high mode share already. And that means that we need to invest in connections. One of the things that I did when I was on the council, which took a good long time because it took some serious convincing of both the business community and the neighborhoods, was make sure that Sherman Avenue was accessible to bikers, but also safe for pedestrians and cars. And that we now have bike lanes on Sherman Avenue, which is something that some people thought would never happen. But that's not good enough, right? We need to have a bike path in that area as well. And that's why, as part of, in my role as the chair of the Oscar Mayer Strategic Assessment Committee, we would have recommended improving their bike connections, or what I would like to call the Smoky Link, behind the Oscar Mayer site. But it's a critical priority, and it's something that we're going to need to make sure is part of our capital investment going forward.
Paul Soglin?
A couple of years ago, the League of American Bicyclists did name us as one of the, as the 5th city being designated with platinum status, the highest award that they've ever given in regards to bicycling. And it was in recognition of the bicycle lanes, the bicycle paths, all the networks of using the rail lines that were abandoned. But we've got a challenge, which is what happens when you're off of those paths, when you're off of those old trails, and you want to get right onto a city street. And we have a dilemma. Part of it is our design in terms of the width of our streets, and the second part of it is winter. Now, well, that's a reality. And so the challenge is, how can we provide protection for the bicycle from the automobile traffic? And we're working on that right now. We're looking at how other cities with wider streets are managing it. We're looking at the type of dividers that are available. I was out at Saris just a couple of months ago, and they built the bike racks, and they are now working on these kinds of protective devices. The key critical element for us is how you get the snow off of it with the divider right there. Collapsible ones are one of the possibilities that they're working on. You can collapse it, plow, and then raise it. But I would say that in the next couple of years, we will see some of these protected dividing devices on Madison streets, particularly, most likely, starting with East Washington. Thank you.
So I'm a year-round cyclist, which I can do because I do have access to protected lanes nearby me. I do ride on the road sometimes too. And there are 4 reasons that I think we have to focus on different modes of transportation than just driving or just transit. The first is environmental. The second is our health and safety. The third is economic. And the fourth is equity. When it comes to the environmental side of this, I think Satya spoke to it. Part of our challenge here is reducing emissions as fast as we can if we're going to tackle climate change. Cycling is one path to get there. So that alone is a good reason to prioritize it. The benefits that we get by reducing traffic, reducing the air pollution that results from traffic are also well known. But I want to talk about some other elements of this that aren't always brought up. Here's some of the research that I've seen. If you have a storefront that has easy access for cyclists or pedestrians, that store actually in aggregate makes more money than stores that rely on car traffic. When you think about cycling and who has access to those networks and who doesn't, it's typically, well, let me rephrase this. When you look at who is riding a bike to commute most often, it's 2 groups of people. It's people who have money and who have access to cycling infrastructure, or it's people who can't afford a car. There's a real equity dimension to giving people as many opportunities and many ways to travel as they possibly can. And as mayor, I would like to make a goal for the city to expand protected bike lanes by about 5 miles, at least. I'd love to go farther. But that should be our goal, rapidly expanding the infrastructure for cyclists to use safely in our city.
What was the question again?
It's about cycling.
I got you, Raj. Could you repeat it?
Sure. Research shows that a large part of our population is interested in biking. They bike on the Southwest Path and during Ride the Drive, but they don't feel safe and comfortable on the busy roads, and they don't feel safe in bike lanes that are next to cars. How can you create a network of bike lanes that is safe and comfortable and serves people of all ages and all abilities?
I think I feel it's self-evident. I mean, you just build safer bike lanes. I live on the Tenney neighborhood. You got East Mifflin that's wide open that no one ever uses. I never see anyone on that. But I think we continue to cultivate a robust and support culture for bicyclists, with the exception of unicyclists. And you guys are laughing. It's coming. It's already here. You're right. But yeah, I think we just continue cultivating a robust and support culture for cyclists. Stay in your lane.
There are several points that I want to point out. To make things safer in the community, one of the points that I want to talk about is transit dependent by the last mile. In our city, we need to think about those residents who need to commute in the city and don't have the transportation accessibility on the bus. So that's one element. There's the concept of the last mile in the community. One of the things that we can definitely do is make sure that safety is available, and the last mile is also a solution for residents who don't have access for buses that come every 30 minutes or every hour in the community, that bike transportation is available for them. We can make sure that there are bike stations available for them, and also for commuters who are coming from outside of the city who work into the city, that those stations are provided to them. Also addressing the environmental issues and lowering emissions. If we can also convince residents who are also commuting into the city and parking on our residential streets to not do that, we can also improve safety in the city, that our streets would be clear, so that our city employees can clean streets more efficiently, so that the bikers that are already in the city, using streets in the city, would feel more safe commuting with bikes in the city. That's a very real solution. Those are things that are very easily accessible. We can address these things very easily if we are really tapping solutions that could work like tomorrow. If we're providing networks that have real viable solutions for bikers to be transformed overnight. Those are things that we can do right now. But we have to build the network with the bike paths and with other transit solutions that we don't have existing right now. Simple fix.
Thank you. This next question, second question on transportation, we'll start with Satya. This question was submitted by the Madison area bus advocates, and they ask, Madison's mayor oversees a city department of transportation that is responsible for a multimodal mobility and parking system. How would you expand on our current transportation system? What is your vision for making it more environmentally and economically sustainable, socially just, safer, socially just, healthier, socially just, and affordable? Please give an example.
Thanks, Maba. I have been a bus commuter ever since I moved to Madison because my first employer subsidized a bus pass for me, and my current employer does that as well. I think that our bus system is a critical component of our full transportation system, but our transportation system has to be about creating access for people regardless of mode, right? We shouldn't be building a transportation system for vehicles. We should be building a transportation system for people. And part of that is for people who are transit dependent. And I think my top transportation priority would be to bring rapid transit to Madison. It's something that we have talked about for somewhere between 30 and 40 years, and yet we don't have a rapid transit system yet here in Madison. And I have to ask why, right? What is that about? I will provide the leadership it takes to get that happening, to get rapid buses on our streets, and to build out a bus rapid transit system as soon as possible. It's a critical improvement that we need to make. And that needs to be a climate-friendly system, so we need to be buying electric buses so that we can reduce the emissions. And it needs to be a system that is regional, not just for the city of Madison. And until the legislature, in its infinite lack of wisdom, returns to us the ability to form a regional transportation system, that we are going to have to build those collaborations with the county and surrounding municipalities ourselves. But I cannot emphasize how much of a priority this is for me. We need rapid transit in the city of Madison, and I will work to make that happen.
I hope I can do this in less than 3 hours. My apologies. Bus rapid transit is our most immediate goal, and I think it's one of the top and most critical needs for our community at this time. If you look at rapid transit systems throughout the country, the evidence is clear. They not only work, but they also need state and federal participation. We simply cannot come up with the hundreds of millions of dollars that's needed. What we have been doing is fashioning our design for the future on the assumption that we will get bus rapid transit. Now, there's several things that need to happen along the way. The first is we need the state's authority not just to create a regional transit authority, an RTA, but we have to have its taxing authority. There must be the revenue to establish such an authority so we can pay for the buses and what is turning out to be one of our biggest obstructions right now, a garage to take care of them. We're talking $40, $50, $60 million, not for the fleet itself, but for the building. one of our key objectives, I'm going to repeat it, is to work with the Evers administration in getting the authority to set up an RTA that would cover about 75% of the population of Dane County. We have already ordered 4 electric buses, and we are envisioning that the system will become all electric with solar. We are talking about collaboration not only with the other communities that would make up the RTA, but MG&E has been a very healthy partner in this design. In addition, we've got to get federal participation. The federal government has to assist us, as it has so many dozens of other cities throughout the United States, but we will get there.
So everyone that has spoken so far has talked about the need for bus rapid transit and the obstacles to getting it, which are largely financial and largely a function of a state legislature that isn't very nice to places like Madison and places all over the state. I actually began my career working in Milwaukee on building a regional transit authority in southeastern Wisconsin. The business community wanted it, the local electeds wanted it, the county executives wanted it, the state legislature was in the way. So here's the question that all of us have to have. Like, we can institute a wheel tax or something like that to try and fund transit more robustly. That seems like a hard political lift too. Or we can have leadership, and we can have leadership that can actually build coalitions of electeds around the country, around the state, to try and sway some of the Republican votes that we're going to need to sway in order to get a regional transit authority. So here's what I'd say I do right now in my role at River Alliance of Wisconsin. I work with local groups and local elected officials in rural Wisconsin and in urban Wisconsin, from places like Green Bay to Wausau to Eau Claire to Racine. And we fight for hard compromises that protect water quality in those locations. We've built relationships with people across the aisle. We motivate them to take aggressive environmental stands in a difficult environment for them. And we do it by being absolutely committed to demonstrating the economic benefits of clean water. But I would say that I can do the same on regional transit as well. From our perspective here in Madison, is a rapidly growing city that needs a regional system if we're going to continue to grow, and if we're going to continue to grow equitably and in a way that's environmentally responsible.
Thank you. Again, to reiterate what I said opening, is that the most marginalized and underrepresented people are affected the most by this. So in terms of public transportation, I think to continue to develop city transportation options that evolve with the growing needs of our community. It's another complicated area requiring interlocking strategies. We need to expand and improve on the bus service provided throughout the city, especially to higher need areas and neighborhoods with people who work heavily or rely heavily or more dependent on public transportation, and should be able to work, run errands, and travel around the city in a way that is reliable and as painless as possible. And continuing to engineer traffic and solutions for all the areas of the city.
Thank you. This is a very tough issue, and to get straight to the point, regional mass rapid transit will happen in the city of Madison. When will it happen? I would say soon. One of the things that we need to do as solutions to manifest this is definitely have real partnership with our surrounding communities. There are many ways that we can bring about this happening without state legislator support. One of the things that we can start doing right away, and some of the conversations that has actually already started happening, is looking at our community stakeholders. There are many funders that we can start talking to right now in our cities. Other communities have looked at clergy to start rattling behind mass rapid transit. They've looked at corporate sponsors to look at supporting mass rapid transit. Now, looking at what Nick talked about in our most marginalized community, wants this happen in our community, and as your mayor, some of the things that I want to make sure that don't happen when it comes, because it will come, and we will find ways to fund this in our community and make sure that our most marginalized and our low income, who are transit dependent in our community, and are disabled, who oftentimes are the ones who are put out first, because paratransit is one of those things that are most challenged and the least of these in our community. Most of our service areas who have 2 transfers or 2 to 3 transfers and travel times in our community. Some of these areas, when you go up and down University Avenue, Mineral Point, don't even have to look at a service schedule. When we have solutions like where should these transit delivery areas go, those are the types of things that our community partners and our regional communities and our municipalities, those are the things that we should work with. But my solution is that when we talk to municipalities and the stakeholders that they're working with, our clergymen, our churches, and our developers, we can come up with real solutions that doesn't necessarily have to come from the state legislator. Let's get innovative, y'all.
Mo?
So to be clear, everyone deserves to have the opportunity to be able to get around our city, to be able to have access to jobs, access to school, access to food. One of the first experiences I had when I was elected to the city council in 2013 was I had a parent call me and say, hey, with this Verona Road reconstruction, I'm being informed that one of the bus routes that goes past our house is going to be removed for a period of time. This parent was extremely concerned. In fact, several members of the neighborhood were upset at the thought, because this was one of the routes that allowed their child to be able to come home from school, from after-school activities and things like that. And so through that experience, I remember being brand new to the city council, and I went to one of my first committee meetings. I sat down and advocated on their behalf, and the committee ended up going with the neighborhood instead of the original recommendation to remove that route. I called that parent afterwards, and she's literally crying. She's in tears. She said, "You don't understand how much of a threat this was to my life, to what I believed that my child would be able to have access to after-school activities." And so I think it's really important that we bring this back to a conversation about people. As mayor, one of the things that's going to be critical, not in addition to advocating for bus rapid transit, I'm going to be advocating for a comprehensive transportation plan, right? So bus rapid transit is super important. Increasing access to transit on the bus is important. I'm a bus rider myself, and that's the primary way that I get to work. But we need to be thinking about from a justice perspective, we need to be prioritizing other solutions, things like access to the bus during the late hours for late night shift workers. We need to be working with the private sector to make sure that they're investing in not only subsidizing rides, but creating a ride share program, because there's plenty of places right now that you can't get access to on the bus in a convenient fashion. So it's comprehensive.
Thank you. We have 2 questions about the environment, and these questions, we're going to give a minute and a half for each of these. The first question is submitted by 350 Madison Climate Action Team, and they ask, what are the most important specific actions that you propose Madison take to move the entire community to 100% renewable energy? And what measures will be needed to ensure equity is a part of the process? Paul.
Well, let's start with transportation. That certainly is one of our goals, and there specifically getting to, as I said, an all-electric fleet for the city bus system, but also as we are now converting to an electric fleet for city vehicles other than buses. That's one place where we're starting. We're also talking to the private sector, not just MG&E, but others who've got properties that can be used for electric charging stations. Solar energy. We are working specifically on solar. You may have seen some of the renovations that have been made in regards to city fire stations and other buildings, which now are solar fueled. I think I mentioned earlier that in terms of the new bus garage, we're hoping that it's going to have an array of solar for that fleet. Water conservation is a real challenge. We have to continue to work in that area in regards to consumption, and particularly not just viewing it from the standard of the water coming into our households and businesses, but the exiting of it. We've taken an innovative step. We're now collaborating with Madison Metropolitan Sewage District to see what we can do in terms of recyclables, in terms of working together in regards to how we dispose of waste, particularly trying to keep it out of the landfills. On a question of equity, I want to go back to the question of water. As the price of water increases, we're going to find it challenging. We're going to find that just as some households need support for energy during the winter months economically, the same is going to happen within the near future in regards to water, and we're going to have to come up with lifeline rates for water and its disposal.
So the mayor talked about the importance of rapid electrification of our transportation fleet, and that is absolutely something we need to pursue and build the infrastructure for. And one of the reasons we need to do that is because that gives MG&E, our local utility, the justification to start building new capacity to bring more electricity into our town. If you look at how energy is sort of priced and produced, MG&E contracts with either buys or contracts with a coal plant and goes to the Public Service Commission and says, "Hey, we need this much energy for our city." In order to get the MG&E to go back to the Public Service Commission in a time of fairly flat energy use, they have to demonstrate demand. And the way you demonstrate demand is by rapidly electrifying a vehicle fleet right now that largely relies on fossil fuels. So if we can do that, we can give MG&E the justification to go out and build more solar, to go out and buy more wind farms, and provide us with 100% clean energy. Something that I would like to pursue, because we are forbidden from instituting a local carbon tax, some way to price this pollution. I'd like to see if organizations, including the city government, but other private entities, would entertain what hundreds of businesses across the world are doing, and that's implementing a carbon pricing scheme just internally. So that means that if somebody is booking a trip for work, there's a kicker in there to compensate for the carbon that you're going to use for that work. The idea is to add a price for carbon into the operations of every business and in the city government as well, driving down usage and hopefully doing something dramatic across the city. One other thing, and I'll be very brief, MG&E has something called a renewable energy rider. It's a way for a corporation to say, we're building a new facility, we'd like it to be 100% solar powered, will you help us build it? Well, MG&E will do that for you. So I'd like to see if the city can partner with major employers to use that tool to provide energy for a large part of the city. So.
I like that. That was good. I agree with Raj. I think we as a city need to start leading and developing strategies and protocols to green the city up by providing incentives for businesses to reduce their carbon footprint and create renewable and reusable products. I'm not going to waste your time with a bunch of other stuff. That's it.
So I think that there are many things that we can do in the city, but there are some things that many residents started doing some time ago and then were met with barriers like solar panels. And these are things that in the city that I think that we can do more collaborative efforts with Madison Gas and Electric and actually look in ways that we can have tax credits that could also offset maybe reducing obstacles and barriers for a lot of our residents in the city of Madison. These are some of the things that I see as real viable solutions. I know that Madison 350 also, for a real period of time, had rain barrels with the downsport of water. These are things that, you know, if we can help residents understand what that does to help our lakes in the community, and not, having these things, add to, the environment and making the air quality and the ground, the ground quality better in our community. But as far as admissions is concerned, anything that we can do to reduce the number of cars on the road and increase the number of ridership on our buses, that also generates revenue to bring down our debt service in the community. And if we can do that, then the number of admissions and the number that we need to target and bringing about awareness is another piece that we need to do, is to, one, build awareness that we need to bring down that number, and then also reduce the number of cars on the road. So there's a combination of things that we can do, and so those are my solutions that I would like to bring to the table.
Mo?
So when we think about the impacts of renewable energy, really the impacts of climate change, we know that there are some communities that are disproportionately affected, right? Communities of color and poor communities are disproportionately affected by the lack of urgency to move us to, as a city, 100% renewable. And so this is an issue that we must have a sense of urgency about. One of the things that that's an impediment to moving at the pace that we really need to is, frankly, the piecemeal approach to progress. And so, as such, as mayor, one of the priorities that I'm going to take is putting a position in the mayor's office that's focused on in the environment and focused on sustainability, so that we can ensure that all of the decisions that we're making as a community, as it relates to policy, as it relates to how we ask the community to come to us for meetings, et cetera, that we're making decisions with a lens towards moving the city to being a more just and more environmentally friendly city. That's going to be important not only for internal city decision making, but so that there is a primary person who is sort of running point and collaborating with the city, with the county, with the state, in order to ensure that we're making progress on this issue that is going to require a level of collaboration that we've frankly never seen before. This is critical, and that's why we're going to commit to a position in the mayor's office that's going to be focused on it.
For the past 13 years, I've been working with cities on exactly this question. How do we combat climate change? How do we increase the use of renewable energy? How do we become more energy efficient? And it is absolutely critical for cities to lead, because you know what? Nobody else is, right? The federal government isn't, state government isn't. It is up to cities to do this. And cities have to make it easy for our residents to do the right thing with respect to energy efficiency and renewable energy. The question was about renewables specifically, but I don't believe you can answer that question without talking about efficiency, because efficiency should always be the first step in reducing the amount of energy we're using before we find a renewable source. So we need to invest in energy efficiency at the city, which we're doing. We need to pass mandatory building energy scorecards so that large commercial buildings have to report their energy use to their tenants so people can make an informed decision. We need to make it possible for individual homeowners to retrofit their homes for more energy efficiency. This is something that I have worked on in other cities, and in fact, right here in Madison through the Green Madison program. For renewable energy, we need to build on the Madison program to make solar more affordable and accessible to everyone in this city. And And that looks like solar-ready buildings. It looks like solar on every roof possible because you can save money, because there are health and comfort benefits. It looks like actually taking advantage of the PACE program, that the Property Assessed Clean Energy program that the county has passed to help finance this. But the biggest barrier, frankly, is MG&E and the PSC. We need the ability to put more solar on more buildings, and that's the biggest roadblock right now.
Thank you. We're going to throw in like a fun, random question. We're going to start with Paul, and we just want to know, you have 30 seconds for this. Just tell us about the moment that you decided to run for mayor. Where were you, and what was going on through your mind?
Which time?
This time.
Same question.
It's the same question.
Same question. I don't know if it was a moment. I think it was a series of realizations. Sometime last spring, watching what was happening in Washington, watching what was happening in our own capital here, and deciding that there was more that all of us needed to do to get involved. I think we saw what some of that looked like for some folks, for a lot of us, last fall when we had such astronomical turnout. For me, it was a moment in spring where I felt like I could do more to help.
Nick?
It was actually in 2007. I was working at a call center and was looking at the primary election returns and was like, that's it? That's all that voted in a progressive city that voted for the office of mayor? And I brought it up to my friend and I was like, what do you got to do to get on the ballot? And he's like, I just collect 200 signatures. I was like, well, we can do that. I can get 1,000 people to vote for me from the bars. 2011, I ran. 2019, here we are again.
I love you, Nick. I just met you too. This is a fun question, but my answer is actually not fun. It really isn't, because I remember the day that I decided to run for mayor, and it was in August of 2016, and it wasn't a pleasant moment. And because the day that I made up my mind, something very pivotal happened that day, and it wasn't a nice day. It was actually a very horrible day. But I made up my mind that I had to do something about the course of events that I was experiencing. And as the equity coordinator, where many people confide in me and come and share things with me concerning employment and their experiences, and not feeling that the city was providing to them fair and equitable opportunities, both internally and externally, I knew that I had to be the one to do something. And I made up my mind as I was no longer able to sit as a partner at the department the department management team meetings, and I decided that I was going to run for mayor.
So November 2016, I remember going on the air. I was being interviewed that night about the election returns, and I had left my house and promised my wife that Hillary was going to win. And I was wrong. Some of you guys lost bets that night too. I didn't know what I would say to my daughter that night. Fortunately, she was only 1, and so she couldn't ask questions. But my mom texted me that night, and she said, how are you feeling? And I didn't answer her, but she followed up and said, don't lose hope. People need to be able to depend on local leaders now more than ever. That planted the seed.
It was somewhere early in 2017, and I was sitting in Collectivo up here on the square, and the latest in a series of people were sitting across from me asking me if I would please run. And they say, you know that women have to be asked 7 or 8 times to run. Took me a few more than that, but I finally started listening. And what motivated me was being fed up with our lack of progress here in Madison and feeling that we really can do better.
Another quick question, 30 seconds or so. We'll start with Raj. Of all the ways that you can contribute and of all the positions that a person can serve, why do you want to be the mayor?
Because of all of the things that you can do to affect people on a day-to-day basis, their day-to-day lives, whether they can afford their rent, whether they can get to and fro on a bike or on a bus, whether we live in a community where each of us respect one another and treat each other as family. That's the one position that felt like I could do the most good as fast as I could.
I would say my strengths are communication with people. And I think that is important in city government, is that you have someone that can communicate and be likable. And you guys okay? You guys all right? Like, you guys are just zoned out. Yeah, it's communication. That's my strength.
I believe my strength is that I bring experience, and I bring truth and transparency, and I listened to what's important to people, and I think that I translate that into your needs and able to implement that. And I really do believe that's my strength. And I'm very discerning about understanding community, and I pay attention to what community wants, and but I can make tough decisions, and not just do the hard stuff, but I can make real tough decisions on what needs to happen within government, because I worked for government for a really long period of time.
So I've seen the hope of our people, and that inspires me. I'm representing the district that I do, such a microcosm of the city. I see our community desperately trying to figure out how we're going to bridge these divides in order to advance our community. One of the most important jobs of the mayor is to be able to set a table, to broaden the table. And my experience doing that, not only in my district, but across the city, as a member of the council, as a member of the business community, as a member of the education community, that's going to be one of the most critical things. And so as mayor, I'm excited to be able to leverage that experience in order to advance our community, to help us live up to the values that we espouse.
Let me try and actually answer your question. I'm a policy wonk, but I'm also a really collaborative leader. And I tried making change at the city level by working with cities all across the country. I tried making change at the city level by working on the city council. I tried it by being engaged in local politics and running campaigns and helping people get elected. And that's good work, and I'll keep doing it, but it's not enough. It's not fast enough. It's not big enough change. And I've seen what you can do in the mayor's office, and I think we need somebody with the political courage to do what needs to be done and not be concerned with the next election.
Paul?
There's been so many different answers. Can I hear the question again, please?
Of all the ways that you can contribute and of all the positions that a person can serve, why do you want to be the mayor?
There were 3 things that converged last fall, at least in terms of my thinking. One was all the people asking me to reconsider and to run. The second was that the city was halfway across a bridge. And the third was the hope and the realistic promise that Tony Evers was going to be elected governor. And I asked the question about managing, and managing does not get a lot of attention in regards to the way people make decisions in voting in elections. But I had that skill set, and I wanted to continue providing that.
Thank you. We're going to go back to our questions. This is our last question regarding the environment. We're going to give each candidate a minute. And this question comes from the First Unitarian Society, Social Justice Ministry, and the Wisconsin Network for Peace, Justice, and Sustainability, and the Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice. What will you do to protect Madison from the dangers of flooding? And how will you engage with lakefront property owners that may not want the lake levels reduced?
There's only one good way to engage with anyone, especially if you anticipate that there might be some tension, and that is directly and honestly. Lakefront property owners obviously have their own interests, but one of the interests of, I have to trust, of people in Madison is that they care about their neighbors. Maybe that's just a belief of mine, but I believe that we can bring people together, and I believe that wisdom can prevail in that situation. One thing that I'd like to do on flooding, what we know is that many of our surfaces are paved over. With our rapid growth, buildings have been built, roads have been built, and surfaces are acting as a big funnel right into our lakes. I would like to explore how we can prioritize green development in this city, using our permitting process to do it. It is what I hear developers asking for. It is what I think will help developers set the bar a lot higher, and it will help us build more housing options in the process.
How do you follow that? This is out of my wheelhouse. I'll just be honest with you. I think we need to, I think it comes back down to communication with homeowners and what exactly we can figure out that everyone comes out ahead. So that's all I've got on that. I'm keeping them sweet and short.
That's a wonderful question, and in light of everything that's happened over the course of last year with rising water, I don't think the solution to addressing rising water in our community is lowering the lake levels. And so my solution to dealing with homeowners in our community is basically really building awareness, number one. Recognizing that we have subject matter experts in our community who look at climate change, weather patterns, and really making sure that our residents that live around the lakes understand what the viable options are. If we're not going to lower the lake levels, one of the things that I would do is really do public participation and engagement and let them know what the options are, and also look at future development and how we can actually do sustainable development and downsizing what is happening and impacting, and really doing divestment on those properties around the lake, and so that homeowners understand what the impacts are going to be if we're not doing real sustainable solutions, like really re-landscaping those lakefront properties and the impacts that are actually going to happen to their properties, and so that they're fully aware what's going to happen, because flood insurance is not an option.
So conversations like this are ones that are hard to have in the abstract and easy to have in practical reality when we know the impact, right? So we should have been proactive about ensuring that we were controlling the threat of the flooding of our lakes a generation ago. It's only this past summer when I think our whole city started to say, this is an imminent problem that we need to deal with. And so because of that, frankly, it's going to be easier for all of us to have a conversation about it. We need to be controlling stormwater runoff. We need to be more intentional about the way that we're going to do that. Families and businesses were affected by millions of dollars of loss this past summer, and so getting into conversations with property owners is a practical conversation to be able to have. Folks need to recognize that our community is at harm if we're not being serious about this.
Look, I'm far more concerned about low-income communities than I am about lakefront property owners with respect to flooding, right? We have to lower the lake levels, right? That has to happen, but it's not up to the city. It's up to the county and the DNR. So as mayor, we'll have to work with them to get that to happen. But we also need to control the rain where it falls. For basically all of our city's history, and this is not unique to Madison, the idea was to take the rain and move it away as quickly as possible. We have to completely reverse that, right? We need to control the rain where it falls using green infrastructure, trees, green roofs, rain barrels, cisterns, rain gardens, bioinfiltration facilities, and we don't have to make this shit up, right? Philadelphia is doing an excellent job. Grand Rapids, Portland, Syracuse, New York. We can learn from cities all around the country. This is not rocket science. We can do this, but we have got to be prepared for the impacts of climate change. And that is an incredibly high priority for me, to look at what's coming and how does the city need to prepare for it, because we can't be unprepared.
It's been 7 years since we looked at Philadelphia's system, which is not in effect, and I think we've got to come to reality. For the quantity of rain that we received in August of this past year, questions about impervious surfaces are irrelevant. The quantity of rain cannot be contained. If you look at all the ability, the pervious surfaces between Madison's west side and Black Earth and Cross Plains, you know that. We had one rain, we had two separate flooding events. They were separate. They didn't have anything to do with one another. The one in the Isthmus is connected to the level of the lakes. The Cheslevich administration and my administration attempted to get the DNR through the process the county executive had been running to lower Lake Mendota. If we lower Lake Mendota, which is about 4 to 5 feet above its natural level, but if it had been lowered by just 2 feet, now, can't do that because there's a whole series of obstructions from here south of Stoughton that have to be addressed. The engineers are working in collaboration with our surrounding cities. We've had Shorewood, Maple Bluff, Middleton, Monona in, and we are working together on both sets of flooding.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to hunger and affordable housing. We have a couple questions on that. Nick, this question goes to you. It's from the Family Farm Defenders, and they ask, what are your top 3 proposals to address chronic hunger in Madison?
To address chronic hunger, admitting it's a problem, I think, for one, and homelessness, and just being decent human beings and taking care of those that are hungry through whatever initiatives you would like to pick.
So this is a very human issue, addressing hunger in the schools. Not just in the schools, but in our community across the board. We know that low-income families, Black and brown families, and those who are typically unemployed, underemployed, when we look at the numbers of unemployment in our community, we would say, oh, our unemployment is fairly low, but we have to remember that there are a lot of people in our community who are not tapping the numbers. And so what would I do to address this? What I would do is I would build better collaborations with our community partners like our church and our local corporations to really build better leadership with these collaborations, because One, we have grocery stores and we have food industries that are readily throwing out food. We would have to address ordinances to be able to not have these organizations be demonized when food is thrown out. We can actually address these issues in our community to build better partnerships. These are things that we can do right away. But when we have safety issues where people are fearful that if I share this food and someone sue me, it's a real problem. And so those are some of the real solutions that we can do, is build better collaborations that families get fed, the school districts partner in building collaborations in those types of respects. But we have to address the ordinance and policies so that people won't be demonized when they're doing these types of things.
So people don't lack for food because they don't want it. They're not feeding their kids because they're not interested, right? When we have chronic hunger in our community, it's for lack of access. That access comes in the form of lack of a sufficient job, good enough income. It comes because we don't have good enough transportation options to be able to get access to food. And it's because we don't have neighborhoods that are sort of sufficiently offering food access. That's what I've been working on in the City Council, is addressing that issue directly. Closing the food desert and Allied was one of the top priorities that I've had, and I'm proud of our success doing that. Likewise, we're going to have to ensure that we're creating transportation access for some of the most poor and marginalized communities that lack access to food. And we're going to have to be proactive about making sure that our community is creating upward mobility so that people can afford to feed their family. It's really as simple as that. People need to be able to afford to feed their family, and the reason why they're not is because as a community we haven't ensured that.
So I've been on the Food Policy Council here in Madison since 2013, and this is actually one of the things that we have worked on during that time. It's a high priority for us. I think that just some of the things that we're working on that we need to be continued. We need to continue to expand access to healthy food in our schools and in our community centers, whether that's through summer food programming or food pantries in schools, or in the lunchroom, healthy food access, or school gardens, just to name a few of the things. And we need to improve healthy retail access in every neighborhood in Madison, and we have a grant program through the Food Policy Council that does that. Part of that is transportation, certainly. We need to continue the food recovery efforts that we're doing and make sure that we're not wasting food that can be eaten. We need to expand SNAP access in our farmers markets and at our WIC sites. We need to continue to improve access to gardening, and particularly community gardens. And this is what we're currently working on, is expanding wholesale food access to make more healthy food from the surrounding farms that surround Madison available to retail here at a cheaper price. But there's so many things going on in the city, and we need to continue to push on all fronts, I think.
There was no food program in the city of Madison until I asked that we replace the city's alcohol official with someone focused on food. I thought that was far more important. We've done so much. I want to go back and review some of those because every one of these items needs to be expanded. We have to expand community gardens. And we have to deal with those situations as we had at Brittingham, when some people are going to object to community gardens as unsightly, as vital as they are to the Hmong community. We have to transform the public market. The public market cannot be a place for tourists and for expensive prepared food. It has to be one that provides fresh food, and it has to be one that collaborates with the producers, so that we can really build a food economy here in Madison and Dane County. I put $300,000 into the city budget for the healthy retail food access, knowing that there's food deserts, and so that the money was available when the Willie Street Co-op needed assistance in getting into the old Pierce location on the north side, and so that we had the funds available for Luna's in terms of the Allied Drive. And I could go on with that. I'd like to talk about schools, talk about the Double Dollar program, and all the things that we didn't have 6, 7 years ago. Thank you.
I don't disagree with much that's been said on this issue, and by way of trying to solve chronic hunger in a minute, I want to focus on one slice of this problem that I think is critical. About half, a little less than half of students in Madison Metropolitan School District, that's where all three of my daughters go to school, about half qualify for free and reduced lunch. So they're at a disadvantage in some ways. Coming into the schools, it makes it very difficult to learn. I'd like to focus just a step earlier on those critical years between 0 to 3, because imagine what hunger means during the period of a child's life when the vast majority of their neurological development happens. If we can begin there, and this is a gap that exists in the services for people, if we can begin there and provide adequate nutrition, adequate wraparound services for the entire family, we can prepare kids for a successful time in school and hopefully a way to combat some of these problems going forward.
Thank you. This next question is submitted by the Affordable Housing Action Alliance. Toriana, you will go first. And the question is, supportive affordable housing developments such as Tree Lane and Rethka Terrace apartments play an important role in providing housing for people who have been living on the streets or in shelters. Describe what you would do to increase support for these residents and to help them be more successful. Please be specific in your answer.
So Housing First is wonderful if met with total wraparound service. When you think about root cause analysis and the whole being, the person, it has to be met with everything. It has to be met with childcare. It has to be met with trauma-informed care. It has to be met with transportation that work. It has to be met with financial services, understanding how to budget, how to manage. It has to be met with, is your credit okay? Do you understand credit management? It has to be met with, cleaning up all of your past wrongs. And in employment, do you have a support network? Because when you can't get to work and your kid is sick in the Madison School District, there's a 24-hour time frame. Who's going to watch that kid? You can't just house people. You have to provide backup services for a family. It's not enough in this community. $15 an hour wages is not enough in this community. Let's talk about $20 in this community.
Thank you.
So everyone deserves the opportunity to live in housing that is affordable, that they have the dignity to be able to sustain themselves in. And as when we look at projects like Tree Lane, as a member of the Community Development Block Grant Committee, these are projects that I've been working on and prioritizing the development of for years. The reality is we need significant services that are going to support people who are entering into facilities like this, oftentimes at dealing with significant trauma, that have a trauma that has carried through their life, whether it's by a lack of access to a job or things that happened in their youth. Folks are dealing with mental health crisis. And so as mayor, one of the things that I'm going to be prioritizing and making sure that we have a mental health crisis and restoration center. We can't piecemeal these solutions by saying we need mental health support over here and over here. But as a community, we need to advance our commitment to ensuring that whether you're someone who's living at Tree Lane or just one of these students who's dealing with significant issues in your home, a mental health crisis center is going to be key.
So Housing First is important, but we should start with stopping people from becoming homeless to begin with. And I think one of the key components there is eviction prevention and making sure that everybody who's threatened with eviction has the right to counsel. And we need to stop the problem before it starts. But given that we already have a number of homeless folks and we are working on Housing First, and we do need to make sure that every Housing First provider in this community has comprehensive training in a trauma-informed approach and can provide the services through case management that these folks need, whether that's mental health or AODA or transportation or any number of other things. But most importantly, we need to make sure that we're collaborating with other units of government, particularly with the county, and with the nonprofit community to coordinate care for these folks and not make them piece it together on their own.
Collaboration on case management is the key. But first I want to point out, we have created 1,000 units of housing for 1,000 families. In about 85% of the instances, everything has gone smoothly, has gone as we would have hoped. But there have been challenges as we've taken some very bold steps, both at Rethke and at Tree Lane, in terms of tackling housing challenges for people who have had the most difficult problems during the course of their lives. We know that there's 4 other elements besides housing that are key to having a stable living situation: transportation, quality child care, quality health care, which includes nutrition and trauma attention, and obviously education and job access. In terms of case management, there are people in this room, there are people within our county who can contribute and assist in providing permanent supportive services, and hopefully there'll be greater financial access to those as Governor Evers makes changes in health care accessibility for all Wisconsin residents, which is long overdue.
I suspect a lot of the tension that we're seeing over Tree Lane will dissipate in the coming months, just as Rethke did over a period of time. There's still challenges that remain, and we're taking steps forward. There are 2 things that I want to focus on, and I agree with a lot of what's been said up here. When I speak to folks who work directly with homeless populations, people experiencing either really acute homelessness or like chronic homelessness, the first thing they mention is that there just isn't enough space for folks in a growing city. We have to look very hard at how other communities and back at what the Obama administration recommended, how we can modernize our zoning system so that we can build more options for people who need more options across the income scale. That's absolutely vital. And then the other part is for all of us in this room and in rooms all across the city to be willing to have a discussion about whether or not we really do want to welcome everyone into our community. I believe we do. I believe we do. But that challenge has to be made to folks across this city. I suspect when it is, on an equity basis, people will welcome facilities like Tree Lane and other Housing First initiatives.
I live in the town of Madison, I found out.
We can't wait to have you.
I can, yeah. But an interesting or a more serious question is what's going to happen to the 6,000 people that 76% of them are renters in the town of Madison in 2022 when it's annexed into the city. I can't imagine property values going down. I myself, I'm 2 years from running for mayor for Sun Prairie. Like I'm this close from being priced out of the city. But the cost of living is going up for the average person, and it's getting harder and harder to find. I think we need to increase personal income, like Tori said, either by raising the minimum wage and having, finding out through either incentive or regulation to ensure rental prices don't go or stay at an affordable level across the city without having any cost to the property owner. So good luck to the next mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. This is our last question regarding housing, and it comes from the Peregrine Forum and the Affordable Housing Action Alliance. And they ask, what specific strategies and specific incentives would you suggest to address the huge lack of affordable housing in Madison? In other words, how can we increase the stock of affordable housing at a more rapid rate?
Yeah, so this is critical. The question around the rate of increase is really where we start to get into something that matters. You know, we talk about how important it is that folks have dignity in housing. Right now, we're seeing the cost of housing increase rapidly, something from $700 for an average one bedroom 10 years ago to more like $1,200 for the average one bedroom. I have personal friends, teachers, firefighters who can't afford to live in our city, folks that are being priced out and can't find their way. What we're going to need to do is significantly advance our investment into affordable housing. I'm going to double the affordable housing fund for the city of Madison and increase our priority for workforce affordable housing, because working families need to be able to live in the city of Madison. Likewise, we need to increase our commitment to affordable housing through TIF and work with the private sector to promote the development of increased housing at, frankly, just a faster rate. As our city continues to grow, that's going to be our challenge.
We just have to build more housing, right? Across the board, at all levels of affordability, we have to increase our production of units. But we also, of course, have to specifically build more affordable housing. Yes, through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, yes, through using TIF, but frankly, I'd really like to expand our use of solutions that don't put money in the pockets of developers and rather keeps that money here where it can build wealth in our community. So that looks like co-ops, it looks like co-housing, it looks like land trusts. There are other cities around this country that are being much more aggressive in their use of creative solutions around housing, and I think we can learn from them. We also just have to make it easier and clearer what we want to have built in this city and make it easier to do it in the development process. And we can look at a whole range of tools. Again, there are cities that we can learn from around this country to make it easier to build affordable housing at all levels.
The reality is that in terms of the tens of millions of dollars that we need to create affordable housing, to create workforce housing, it comes from only two sources. It comes from that last year of TIF, and it comes from the federal government's low-income housing tax credit program, which can only be used with private sector partners. That's the reality. I don't know where else you're getting the tens of millions of dollars to add to this. But let me point out, there are some things we can do. For example, we are examining all of the shopping centers, the two shopping centers at the corner of Whitney Way and O'Dana Road. We're looking at East Town, West Town, the strip malls. Anything that can be done where there's inefficient acres and acres of parking and dead retail that needs to be replaced and put in there units, and we're trying to encourage the owners of these properties to rebuild, redesign with street grids, with retail on the first floor and housing up above. We're looking at San Francisco and other communities like San Francisco and the mistakes that they have made in not preparing for workforce housing. We've made a zoning code change. We adopted. We did the zoning code rewrite, which put the lid on housing before it was adopted. Everybody was waiting. And finally, we got form-based codes, and that's what led to the great expansion and the whole 6,000 units that have been built since that time. Was that 30 seconds or 60 seconds? I'm done? Okay.
So those of you that are going to come to a lot of these forums, you're going to hear me say this a lot. We need to be looking at cities like Minneapolis and cities like Palo Alto and cities like Grand Rapids that are looking at their zoning codes and coming to the conclusion that single-family zoning has some pretty ugly side effects, inequities in our community being one of them. Minneapolis, not so far from here, is eliminating single-family zoning. That doesn't mean single-family homes go away. It means that construction of different types of options becomes more possible. So we really need to look at what is the right solution for Madison. That'll involve a lot of conversations, and we need to have them. Second thing, I would like to look at how the Housing Trust Fund can be adjusted so that we can address one element of the housing crisis in this community that we haven't talked much about, and that's folks who have been living here for 30 years who are now on a fixed income, seniors who are faced with a property tax bill that's jumping dramatically and have to think about moving when they don't have the funds. So expanding the trust fund to be able to be used for dislocation services or dislocation funds to make sure that people can stay in their homes is absolutely vital.
I was told by my landlord when negotiating price of rent, he said, a rising tide lifts all ships. And I said, that's true, except if the ships have holes in them. So it's complicated. Raj, what you said, what Raj said.
What's on your cards, man?
Nothing that's been talked about here.
And I ask him that every time I sit next to him. Read your cards. So one of the solutions that housing affordability is really huge for me, but one of the things that I would say, and I have many solutions in this area, but create opportunities of collaboration for investors and developers, property owners, renters, neighborhood associations, partners, communities of colors, senior advocates, and all marginalized identities to come together and do created equity contracted strategies for development housing from beginning to end with guidance with equity language and requesting financial proposal for proposed and pass exclusionary zoning for land use ordinances. We actually need to do more exclusionary zoning in this city. These are things that we're not doing, and we need to do more of them. We need more mixed-use housing, and if we're going to use TIF funding, we need to do it early on in the RFP process where developers understand from beginning to end, if we say 33 and a third, that low income, middle income, and market rate renters are treated fair and just and have a place to stay. Stick to your word.
Thank you. We're going to ask two easy, fun questions. I don't know if they're fun for you guys or not. So, Mo, we'll start with you. If you imagine you're the mayor, what is going to be the most challenging part of this job for you?
So I have a number of friends who've been working on the transition for Tony Evers that's been happening for months and months and months. And in talking to a friend of mine who's been a part of mayoral transitions, this is actually one of the things that I think is an enormous challenge is, I don't know if you guys know, but 2 weeks after the mayoral election, the mayor takes office. And so that 2-week transition time is an exciting and challenging time period.
I don't think it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity. We're going to have almost half the city council will be new. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity to really get some things done and to form new partnerships between the mayor's office and the city council and to try some creative and innovative solutions.
Well, as you know, we have to deal with the real world. That means dealing with the state statutes, which severely tie our hands in so many areas, from sustainability and environmental challenges to the kinds of things we want to do in repealing Act 10. And of course, now that kind of level of challenge has been escalated to the federal government with what the Trump administration is doing. So the great challenges over the next 4 years is going to be working out solutions for this city, continuing on the great future that we've got, what we've built on, and try and get some accommodation, some future collaboration with the state and the federal agencies.
I think the biggest challenge is going to be helping the community set priorities in an environment where we have limited resources. We will have to make tough decisions going forward on a range of issues that are important to all of us, from housing to transit to the environment to social and racial equity. But the decisions need to be made. I do that right now as an executive director of a statewide group. It is not always the easiest thing. It is always challenging, and I expect that to continue as mayor.
Imagine if I'm mayor. Get involved, it could happen. I think the most challenging thing as mayor would just be the infinite patience you have to show. And that a job that is, you're adhering to the public. Think about it, all of you don't want to be mayor, none of you want to be mayor. It's a tough job, and I think patience would be the biggest challenge.
I see every challenge as an opportunity. Currently working for the city of Madison, I would look at this as a wonderful opportunity. And so moving forward as Madison next mayor, I would lean into the opportunity of every resident in the community and use the following 2 weeks as an opportunity to really hear from residents to set the agenda. And so that would be the challenge, really listening and allowing residents to voice as I transition.
One more really quick question. Imagine that you are a developer wants to develop an apartment complex, but the residents in the area are opposed to it. How are you going to handle conflict? Vehemently opposed to the idea. How do you handle conflict? Satya, do you want to go ahead and start?
Well, you know, as this is something that every alder has to deal with, and I dealt with many times in my time on the council. You draw on your skills as a facilitator, you listen, you hear people's concerns and fears and what's underneath them. You have a dialogue, you compromise where it's necessary, and you try and find a solution that works for everyone. And you know, that sort of collaborative, facilitative leadership style is what I'll bring to the mayor's office.
Well, I've never been in that position, but if I were to advise somebody, I would say the first thing is you have to understand Madison and the neighborhood. And in most of these discussions, we start out with what is so Madisonian, which is our desire to stop sprawl and stop chewing up cornfields, and at the same time, we don't like density. So I'd kind of bring that to the table, and I would engage the council members affected, the neighborhood groups, and I'd get a very soft chair and go to an awful lot of meetings and just sit there and listen.
Those developments that I've seen that have caused the least friction in neighborhoods, and I live on the near west side, people like their friction when there's a development. Those that have caused the least friction have had a developer who approached the community in a way and with honesty, who approached the community directly, who approached the community proactively, brought the community into the process of making the development. That's the only way you ever truly make progress. You ask people to invest in the success of something. That's the only way I know how to do it, and I suspect that that would work well for that developer too.
Now imagine I'm a developer. A lot of imagination going on here. I think it's back to what Satya said. I think it just comes down to communicating and getting people excited about the project in any way that you can.
So if I was a developer, I would do my due diligence and be very educated on public participation strategies. I would learn my community. And knowing my background on public participation, which is an international practice, I would do everything to unpack my unconscious bias and make sure that I know everything that there is to know about the community that I'm entering in. I would inform the community where I stand and what I'm bringing to the community, and then I would seek their input. And I would do it in multiple languages. I would deliver the messages in their languages. I would provide interpreters. And then I would also meet at times that is most convenient for them. And then do world cafes. I would bring it in multiple strategies, because it's not about my needs, it's about the needs of the community. And that's what good governance is about, the needs of the community. And as a developer, that's what I would do. And as your mayor, that's what I would do. It's about your needs, and it's also about making tough decisions.
So too many projects in our community are developer-led. The city really needs to be in the driver's seat, setting a clear expectation for how we want our community to continue to grow and change and diversify. And so as mayor, one of the things that, that I'll help our community to do, and frankly work closely with the alders to be able to do, is to set a table early for community engagement with developers. That's what I've had to do on the city council, and most all the developments we've seen have actually gone relatively smoothly, because when someone comes to me, a developer comes to me, the first thing I say is we need to engage the community early on this so that we can have honest conversation.
We have 2 questions left, and then we have a couple that are submitted from the audience. This area, we're going to be talking about law enforcement and police. I want to give each of you the full 2 minutes to answer this next question, only because it has repeatedly been submitted several times, several organizations, also online on Facebook. The question comes from the ACLU People Power, Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice, also online, and they ask, as Madison grows and becomes more diverse, there continue to be incidents that arouse community concern regarding the Madison Police Department's use of force with people of color, both young and adults. Do you believe that the present oversight and safeguards are adequately addressing concerns of communities of color? And if not, how will you interact with the police and use the city's power to achieve positive change? Please be specific. Satya.
Are we doing enough? No. Do we need to do more? Yes. We lack trust between our police department and, frankly, our city and communities of color, and that's unacceptable. Bear with me, I'm going to get a little wonky. The OIR report had, that the City Commission had 148, I think, recommendations in it. And the ad hoc committee on police policy and procedure is currently writing their report to advise us on which of those recommendations should come forward and if there are any additional ones. I'd be happy to sit with any of you at any time and go through those 148 and tell you what I think of them. For the most part, I think they're good. But what is most important in there, I think, is a call for increased accountability of the police department to the community, and particularly increased accountability for the police chief to the community. And I would stand behind those recommendations and work to implement them as mayor. We need to do better. We need to restore trust. We need to stop over-policing communities and look at ways to create safety that aren't just about law enforcement.
My count was 146, but it's close. In any case, I think even without waiting for the final report that's coming from the committee, there's certainly 3 areas we can start and have started working on. One has to do with officer training, particularly officer training about implicit bias and the use of force, and changing the policies and procedures on force. That's the first area. The second area is we have to have a better system in regards to accountability coming from the public to the department itself and to the elected officials. This is all set by state statute. And so it's been a very formal process over the years, over 100 years, in that it first goes to the chief, it then, depending on appeals, goes to the Police and Fire Commission. And the Police and Fire Commission is the final authority by state law on questions of hiring, firing, and discipline. And I think we've got to find, just as we're changing our approach to the criminal justice system and trying to keep or find alternatives to that, we need to find some constructive alternatives so that there's greater interchange and greater discussion between the public concerned about these issues and the department. The third area that I'd look at is how we deal with accountability for individual officers. And that is something that I know the department's working on and is giving recommendations in terms of modifying its professional standards and how interventions take place. The last thing I'd just like to say about all of this is that the discussion has involved a very small portion of the community in this committee, between those people who are adamantly supportive of the police without question and those who don't trust the police under any circumstances. The larger community, and I'm pledged to do this, the larger community of Madison, Wisconsin has to be engaged in this discussion. It cannot be left to people who are so adamant in one view or the other.
Thank you. So no, we aren't doing enough. Increased transparency, yes. Increased accountability, yes. Increased training, absolutely. Maintained commitment to hiring officers of color and women, absolutely vital to the entire environment. But I come at this as a father of a child of color with a disability, who is both uniquely vulnerable to the world around her and the dangers of the world around her, and she's also uniquely vulnerable to police abuse. This is just by the statistics. So I have some real sensitivities to multiple sides of this issue. What I mostly believe, or at least one point that I'd like to draw out from this discussion that I don't think has been talked about enough, is the role of leadership at the top of the police department, leadership in general. Now, we had a president, Barack Obama, that the moment he left office, a new style of leadership entered into our country's psyche, and everything changed. Felt like everything changed to me. Discourse changed, the way we approached problems changed, the way we communicated with each other changed. I would like to speak with Chief Koval, and we've had this conversation in a limited way, but I'd like to talk to Chief Koval about whether blog posts are the right way to communicate with the community about these issues, about whether comments about families who are hurting that cause pain, about whether that is the right way to diffuse tension in our community and make progress on some really important issues. It is absolutely vital for a person who is in a position of authority, who has accountability to the public, to treat the public, including common council members, including families of people who are in pain, with the utmost respect at all times. That is the responsibility you have as a public official. That is what we need to demand of leadership at the police department.
Are there any police officers in here tonight? I'm asking that because I know it's a very stressful job. I was gonna be a police officer down in Spartanburg, South Carolina, where makes this place look like utopia. But I think what can be done is just rethinking policing altogether. Is why not have the police department operate like the fire department, where they're not patrolling and then they can use downtime to get this added training in de-escalating situations, so they're not using deadly force on a kid who's having a bad trip on some mushrooms. I think we need to look at more community policing models, providing stability in the neighborhoods of our city, emphasizing safety, promoting and protecting equity, and just being smarter about policing and getting the right people who should be police officers. the adrenaline of it, attracts a certain kind of person. And I think if we do more community policing, we can kind of weed those people out.
So I have a lot to say about this. My son is sitting in the audience, Ashton Kendall Mazuma V. First of all, Ashton Kendall is a young African-American child. Pretty soon, Ashton Kendall is going to be taller than I am. And there are many days I think about him walking and someday being faced with the telltales of many young men driving while being Black, walking while being Black, wearing a hood while being Black. And this is my only child, my only male child. Now, I train Madison police officers. I do the explicit bias training with the Madison police officers. And I often tell them, I trust you as far as I can smell you. No, I'm very candid with them because 99% of them are decent men and women. They're good. But as Nick said, when we're training men and women, and oftentimes a lot of these men and women don't live in the city of Madison, but yet work in the city of Madison, bias is very real. And when it comes around to use of force, bias is very real. And when you're working with communities of color who you're not interacting with until you're working with them, bias is very real. And I was there with the OIR folks when they first came into Madison and they worked in our communities. I was there. I was part of that process. What needs to happen? When our police chief blogs, and there were several things, and I've even communicated to the mayor several times when there were things put on the blog, and our Madison Police Department has one of the highest percentages of Black and brown people in our city workforce. It kills the morale when people in our leadership say very controversial things when you have the most Black and brown people in our leadership. Under my administration, those things will not be tolerated. Because you can't have the most Black and brown people working for you, but then turn around and say very controversial things about Black and brown people. It doesn't work that way. Because if you're doing it in your leadership, what's the tone that you're setting for the community that we serve? It doesn't work that way. Just saying.
No, of course, community police relations are not adequate, right? I mean, by nature of asking that question, we're answering it ourselves. And it's important to acknowledge what we're talking about and who we're talking about here, right? The reality is, folks that look like me are disproportionately likely to be engaged with the police, arrested, going to serve longer sentences, and that we've baked that in almost in our psyche, right? I really want to challenge you to recognize that that level of injustice ought not be normalized. We don't need to give up on the idea that everyone should be able to feel safe in their community, that everyone should be able to feel represented and protected by their police. I was talking to young men in my district recently, a number of high school age Black men, and they said, I'm afraid of the police, but I don't want to be, right? How many of you are afraid of the police, right? Probably I see some hands. Probably most of you are not, and certainly you don't want to be, right? That reality stems from, I believe, our willingness to give credence to the idea that that's going to be normal, right? It took the council's courage to be able to invest significant $400,000 into what has the opportunity to be a reform of the way that we think about policing. We absolutely need to be critical of the way that we do, the way that our police exercise use of force. We absolutely need to ensure that the PFC is something that our community, that our whole community can trust as a vehicle to be able to exercise to express their concerns and has to know that they're going to get results. And likewise, transparency of police data is critical. It needs to be easier for folks in the community to know where are arrests happening, who are being most affected. That sort of data has to be readily available quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We have one last question. We'll keep it to a minute for the interest of time, and we also have just a couple of questions from the audience. If we could keep these down to 1 minute answers, that would be great. The question is submitted by the Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice and the First Unitarian Society Social Justice Ministry and the Wisconsin Network for Peace, Justice, and Sustainability. Given the recent ICE raids and the limited role that the mayor has to intervene, how do you plan to support the undocumented community in Madison? What issues are they facing, and what specific policies would you implement to protect the community? Paul.
So let me first mention that after a number of requests, I had an opportunity finally in December to meet with ICE in Washington and confronted them with what they did here in our community. And the only positive thing I feel that came out of the discussion, and I hope it's meaningful, is that they acknowledged that their subterfuge in avoiding or taking a tactic of avoiding notifying us of what was to take place was wrong, that it will not happen again, and that they will use the designated phone number in regards to notifying the Madison police. They also mentioned my friend Libby Schaaf, the mayor of Oakland, and how when she found out that that a raid was pending, and she publicized it and said to me, based on that, they weren't going to share information directly with me because they didn't trust me. We've contributed to the Immigration Legal Fund. We have supported and are continuing to support a rapid response team. We have had many press conferences. I guess my time's up, but there's a number of things that we are doing and will continue.
I am the son of immigrants and take these matters pretty personally. I think about my own parents. I think about my own sister, all of whom have been naturalized, and whose own immigration status is under threat because of what the president is doing. What leaders in the immigrant community have said to me is that among the most important things that we can do as a community is to ensure that folks facing challenges like those presented by ICE have adequate legal representation, and that those attorneys are at the ready and that they're well funded. I absolutely applaud what the mayor and the Common Council did to increase funding to the legal fund. We need to find ways to augment those funds in other ways as well. The city can't just do it alone, but we have businesses that rely on immigrant employees that should be a part of the solution as well.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think, are we doing anything to help these immigrants obtain legal status? No? Is that? You guys don't know?
We are.
It's a federal thing. Okay. I think we should, I think we should definitely help them try to obtain the legal status in order that they're not worried about someone knocking down their door.
I also agree with everything that has been said. And in addition to that, some of the solutions that I would also put forward As the equity coordinator, I'm also partnered with the Government Alliance of Racial Equity, which is a national organization that we also partner with the Rapid Response Team that is also partnered across the nation with the ACLU, the Center of Social Inclusion, Race Forward. And that Rapid Response Team, which also works here in the city of Madison, paired with what the mayor talked about with the funds, what we can do is also teach and build partnership with our, our Latino Chamber of Commerce, and work with our DACA immigrants and the Central Hispana, so that residents understand what bystander training is, and so that they understand what their rights are. Those are real things that we can do and build collaborations.
I've said several times, I mean, we need to call what it is. ICE's attack on our community was terrorism this past year. Families and children were scared for their livelihood, scared for their ability to even just stay together as a family, and community was under attack. As mayor, one of the things we need to recognize is that folks need access to the basics, need access to jobs, need access to housing, need access to support systems. You know, specifically as it relates to the immigrant community, we need to be supporting. I'm proud of the fact that the council has supported the immigration funds at an all new level. We need to continue to support rapid communication throughout the community. We also need to center the immigration community in other decisions that we're making. So on issues like policing, you know, I have been opposed to police body cameras specifically because of hearing from the immigrant community that the idea that police would be entering into their home and wearing a camera and potentially documenting them and therefore exposing their status is a significant fear. So we need to center that community in all sorts of decisions.
Our first priority has to be protecting our community. We need to do that through keeping people out of the system and off of ICE's radar so they don't pop up for deportation. We need to make sure that folks know their rights, and we need to make sure that we all as neighbors know how to intervene if ICE does come to town. And that's something the city can lead on. Of course, folks facing deportation need to have the right to counsel. But more broadly, we need to make sure that Madison is a truly welcoming city. And that looks like language access. It looks like encouraging civic engagement from immigrant communities. It looks like protecting low-wage workers, which are disproportionately undocumented folks, from things like wage theft and making sure that they have workplace protections. We should be looking at faith IDs, which is a version of municipal IDs, but you don't have to give your data to the city where it can be discoverable. And we need to be supporting entrepreneurship in immigrant communities so that they can succeed.
Thank you. Raj, what 2 words do you want voters to associate with your name? It's not really seconds. 2 words.
Get involved.
Nick?
Or you'll end up with a mayor like me.
Write-in candidate. So.
Progress and urgency.
Experience and vision.
Compassion and trust.
Questions from the audience, real quick. I guess we'll go to Nick. How would you help close the racial opportunity gap for Madison's youth? And we're giving...
He's passing. Can I answer?
Sure.
Oh,
Okay.
This is a great question. One of
30
the One of the things that I would do to change the opportunity gap for youth in this community is, we actually have Madison College, we have a vocational school, but we also have pathways in the Madison School District. Right now, they're only looking at certain things right now in the school district, which is the healthcare. But one of the things that I actually think that really needs to happen if we're going to address public safety in our community where our kids are actually out of schools is that we need to implement real community services in our schools and mentoring opportunities. And when the mall policy went into effect last year, what I did was I met with the Wanda Foremore students and I taught them real legislative policies and how to address legislation when it's happening to them. And I taught them the we the people process and how do you address real policy change when it's happening to you. So what I wanted them to do was say, hey, you can start your own business, address real policy, swift changes when it's happening to you, and attack big businesses when they attack you. And so those are the things that I would want to do so that they can create strategies that work for them and also create their own EIN number, create a business, and come back at businesses and say, hey, you're kicking us out, but this is what we're going to do. We'll set up shop and we'll set up a business in this business.
That was way better than anything I was going to say.
Mo?
Yeah, so our schools make up our city, right? Our young people are not only our future, they're our present. And so one of the things that as mayor I'm going to prioritize is making sure that our kids have hope, that as a past tutor in our schools and as a member of the board of the Foundation for Madison Public Schools, one of the things that we talk a lot about is how, young people in our community need to have a stake in the success and future in our community. And when we talk about the educational opportunity gap, it starts at the beginning. So a comprehensive cradle to career program where we're bringing together all the different support systems is going to be key. One of the things we're going to start with when I'm mayor is we're going to create a college savings account for every child in kindergarten. So on the first day of school, they get a little packet that says that they have a savings account for their future. That's critical. Not only will that not be paid for at taxpayer dollars, but it's critical because it's based on research that shows that a young person with a college savings account at a young age, regardless of where they come from, is 3 times more likely to go to college and 4 times more likely to graduate. We have to raise the bar for our kids in this community.
I think young people need agency over their own lives, and we need to trust them more and invest in them and build their capacity. And that looks like a lot of things, just a few of them. We need to be focusing on out-of-school time and the opportunities that kids have in that time. We need to make sure they have adequate nutrition and transportation to get where they need to be. We need to practice restorative justice and keep kids out of the system. But most importantly, we just need to build capacity in our young people, in our communities, and we need to recognize the grassroots solutions that already exist, things like mentoring positives, that it took us far too long to recognize and invest in. I don't think that City Hall knows all the answers. I think that communities can invent their own answers, and City Hall needs to be smart enough to recognize them and lift them up and invest in them.
This question, to me, gets to what I think is the most important challenge facing the city of Madison. It's something I'm going to discuss in my conclusion, but let me start now because it's certainly not going to happen in the next 30 seconds. Peer support is absolutely critical to the future of this community. We didn't call it that when we first set up Harambe, and ended up following the establishment of Harambe with a continual drop in African-American infant mortality until it actually was at the same level as the rest of the community. Unfortunately, the program was discontinued. Now, in the last 30 months, break it up into 2 segments of 15. In the 15 months leading up to August 4th of 2017, we had 14 homicides involving African-American young men and women on one side of the gunner or the other. In the last 15 months, that number has dropped to 3.
There are two things that I'd like to focus on to help alleviate some of the disparities that we're seeing. The first is at the very beginning of a child's life. The ages is 0 to 3, and we've talked about this before. It's absolutely critical that at that point in life, when 80% of your brain is developing, that we provide children and their families with the supports they need to make sure that that child gets the right nutrition, to make sure that that family gets the right guidance through a very challenging moment in life, and to ensure that that child is ready to learn when they get to school age. It doesn't stop there, but that is a critical area where we lack resources and we need to focus energy. The second thing is I would like to formally include youth voices into city committees, into city government to whatever extent is legally possible. We need to be making decisions, or more accurately, they need to be making decisions about the issues that that affect them, and I'd like to include their voices in what we do.
Okay, I'll take one more question from the audience and then we'll do final statements. This question is, which of the city's current policies is failing or is inadequate, and what would you do differently as mayor? And we'll start with Raj, Raj, go ahead.
I think obviously housing is inadequate right now. We can see rising costs in housing. We can see people being turned away from Madison who want to live here because of those rising costs. And we can see a homeless population that doesn't have anywhere else to turn. We've talked a lot about this issue tonight, and I'll just repeat. I think we have to find ways to modernize our zoning codes so that we can build more housing for people across the income spectrum. This is not an uncomplicated problem, and it isn't one that happens overnight, but it is one that we can make steady progress on, perhaps even enormous progress on, provided we commit to working with all of the stakeholders involved, from the neighborhoods, from the development community, of course, and from those people who are coming up with innovative models to provide more housing in our community. But modernizing the zoning code is absolutely vital.
Nick?
Yeah, I agree with Raj. I think again, to reiterate, the most marginalized and most oppressed members of the city feel the issues that we're talking about the most. Personally, I'm still interested in what's happening with the town of Madison and 6,000 people that are going to be city residents on property. I think that is just going to, the price is just going to continue to rise. So,
in the area of housing under my leadership, one of the things that I would definitely address first is existing issues in some of our communities that have the greatest challenge, our low-income, marginalized communities, and definitely those communities of Black and Brown. We currently have situations with property owners who are unfairly and quite unjust evicting people who we know that have the most complexity with finding new places or residents. And most of these residents are, experiencing bed bugs, they're experiencing broken appliances, things of that nature. And these tenants are facing issues when they file complaints, they are being retaliated against. So how can, in my leadership, that I can provide real solutions with my planning department to address these issues? These are the things that I would do in my leadership that I don't feel that's happening now to prevent these residents from being evicted. We have to take swift action to prevent more homelessness in our community.
Mo?
So I think what you're going to continue to hear is the concern around livability. The city of Madison is in a position where we're rapidly growing and rapidly diversifying, but we have not had near a significant enough commitment to keeping up with the rate of growth and the rate of progress in our city. And so, as mayor, one of the things that I'm going to prioritize is making sure that we are setting realistic bars for where we need to grow in terms of development in the city. Setting a bar of 1,000 units over 5 years keeps up with the pace. It keeps the needle flat, but it's not significantly advancing the cause of making sure that our community is becoming more affordable. And so we need to be significantly more ambitious about promoting growth in our city, and we need to hold ourselves accountable, not to the progress that we make on paper, but to the progress that we make in real people's lives. There's still thousands of families in Madison that are not benefiting from our commitment to affordable housing because our commitment isn't great enough yet.
I've spent some time with Madison's ordinances, and there's plenty of work to do there, but I think actually what's more important is what's missing. We don't have a policy on how to do anti-displacement work in this community. You've all talked about housing. I won't add anything there. We've talked about transit already. We do not have a comprehensive policy on preparing for climate change. That's critically needed. And I don't know if this meets your definition of policy, but honestly, the things that's most on my mind right now is the hundreds of thousands of dollars that we've given to Chicago's version of Trump for Judge Doyle Square, and the just bad decision after bad decision after bad decision that's been made about that site that's wasted millions of dollars for the city. And we'll see if it can be fixed, but that's the thing that I think needs the most fixing.
Continuing with where I was on the last statement, it's estimated that there's between 80 and 120 young men and women, mostly African American in this city, who have been participating in some of the most dangerous activities possible. You've read about the car thefts, you've read about the home break-ins. It is not going to end well unless we get collaboration with the justice system, with the county, with the nonprofits, as well as the city. Despite everything we've done in regards to the Wanda Fulmore program, the tremendous expansion of our summer youth employment program, all of these activities, these kids that we're talking about are not engaged. They are not responding. It's going to take an extraordinary effort involving peer support to reach these kids.
Thank you. And we will go in reverse order and give every candidate 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Toriana?
I want to say thank you for being here this evening and your dedicated couple of hours sitting here. In closing, I want to say we need your support. I definitely need your support. On the issue of peer support, it takes more than all of the things that the mayor said. What these kids need is parental support. What these kids need is real solutions that they design that by their accord on what's going to transition their life. The courts can't do it. The people that don't look like them, that's not black and brown, can't do it. But they need solutions that they feel that's going to work for them, because when these young people get in trouble, they oftentimes are getting guidance by people that don't look for them. So that's all I'm going to say on that. Moving forward, as Madison next mayor, what I want to bring is grassroots leadership that's transformative, that's innovative, with real solutions that will work for the city. I've been in this role for 3 years. I've worked for the state, teaching and mentoring, collaborating with department heads for agencies as the foremost experts on human resource management and leadership and development. I have been a grassroots activist for 20 plus years. I have the solutions. I have been doing public participation and engagement, and I know what it is to lead with race. And if we're going to really say that we are a progressive and forward community, we have to get out of the illusion that we are, and we actually have to get down to actually doing it. The lid have to come off, and I'm gonna say this, and the hood actually has to come off as well.
I'm with this guy right here in the third row. I'm doing this as a civic duty. I'm learning about this process that is running for mayor, and I'm still learning. But I do think it's also a learning moment for Madison, with only 10 to 20% of people voting in mayoral primaries. It's really opening yourself up to someone like me, getting out there and getting motivated. And I think I'm just trying to bring new ideas to it, and not calling anyone out here on stage, not calling you guys out. You guys all showed up. Give a round of applause for yourselves for participating. Or don't, that's fine. You guys can be exhausted. But yeah, get involved and, decide if you want to be progressive. How progressive do you want to be, or how progressive do you want to continue pretending to be?
So I'll end as I began this evening. We are what we do in Madison. We are more than campaign promises that go unfulfilled. We are more than research papers that go unread. We are what we do in this community. And here's what I have done. I'm the chair of the city's Sustainable Madison Committee. We have committed the city to 100% renewable energy. I hope the government can get there within the next 10 years. I'd like the city to get there by the year 2045, and I will work diligently to do just that. I'm also the executive director of a statewide water policy group. I'm asked to set a vision for a talented team and make very difficult decisions to guard their welfare and to guard the interests of our members across the state, and to promote a mission that seems larger than life sometimes, protecting clean water in the face of all of the challenges for our environment right now. But we have some very tough decisions ahead of us. Housing is not as affordable as it needs to be. Our transit system is broken for too many people in our community. And racial and social divisions continue to fracture this community. But we are what we do, and we can make a sustainable, equitable, vibrant community for everyone if we commit to working together. So here's something that you all need to do. You need to get involved in rooms like this, and thank you for all being here, but also committee rooms in City Hall, in the voting booth, absolutely, February 19th primary. And in your own neighborhoods, where you need to show the kind of attention and the kind of compassion to your neighbors as you have tonight to all of us here on stage. Head to rajshukla.com, RAJSHUKLA.com, for more information on how you can get involved with doing in Madison and not just talking.
Let me tell you, it is really tough sitting here. Sitting here and thinking back about what a great place the city was, where we were 7.5 years ago. There was no Housing First program. We were stuck not being able to adopt a downtown plan. We weren't recognizing the challenges of race and equity. Look at how we have done compared to the rest of the nation. Look at the progress we've made since 8 years ago. But there is a long way to go. There are still gaps in disparity. There are still challenges that we can take on. But I can tell you this, it is so frustrating. We get something proven like peer support, whether it was in the area of health, whether it was the area of dealing with the criminal justice system and violence. Twice, I tried to significantly increase our commitment to peer support. Twice, the Madison City Council cut the funds from what I had requested. Going into the area of peer support doesn't meet the old-fashioned standards. We're not dealing with white-led nonprofits. We're not dealing with organizations that can walk in and give you the scientific data that's demanded all the time in terms of give us fact-based evidence that this works, except that we can look at times when things have made improvements. I want to continue this job. I want to finish this job and make sure that when we claim we're a progressive city, we really are. And let me just make one more observation. This city is not racist. The city suffers from problems of racism, but most of the people in this city, the far majority, are good, caring people, and they want to join in and collaborate in making a difference. Thank you.
You all are troopers. Thanks so much for staying all the way to the end. You've heard about a lot of issues. There's been a lot of talk. I think it's time to stop just talking and to start doing. For the past 13 years, I've been working with cities all around this country on all of the issues that we've talked about tonight and many more. Mayors literally call me up and ask me for advice on how to deal with these issues. We do research and writing and peer learning and technical assistance. And one of the things I've learned is that you have to, as mayor, have the political courage to get things done. You can't be thinking about what's expedient. You can't be thinking about the next election. You have to do what's right. I have that political courage. I am proud to have the support of a number of folks in this room and also folks like Lisa Subeck and Joel Rogers and Spencer Black and Rebecca Kemble and Robbie Weber, Frank Emsack, Carrie Schumann and Fred Clark, Pam Porter, Walker Kahn, I see you, Cassie Steiner, Eric Sundquist, and many more whose names are listed on the website, satyaformadison.com. I have the experience and the vision to help this city live up to its full potential. I hope that tonight I have earned your vote on February 19th. I encourage you to learn more about the campaign at satyaformadison.com. And I'm happy, even though I know you're probably all done with questions and answers, if you did have more questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you one-on-one tonight. Thanks so much for coming, and thanks again for sticking it out. It's been a long evening.
Thank you again to the organizers. Thank you to all of you, as Satya said, for sticking it out with us. I'm running for mayor of Madison, as I said, because I love this city. And at the crossroads of all of these issues that we talked about today, housing and transportation, education, policing, at the crossroads of all these issues that we're talking about and we're going to continue to talk about throughout the course of this campaign is the issue of inequality. Our city has, for too long, shrugged our shoulders at the data and not taken responsibility for the fact that our city is indeed a place that can lead by example. I believe that the city of Madison, with commitment, with urgency, with collaboration, with true engagement with folks that are most affected, folks that don't have the opportunity to be here tonight, we can be a model for this nation, for what it looks like to close the gap of inequality in our city. An inclusive, innovative, safe city doesn't happen without work. The way that we're going to live up to our own values as a progressive city is by us coming together, by us committing to progress, and by us working with a sense of urgency. I'm running for mayor of Madison to expand what it looks like and it feels like to be a Madisonian, to bring more voices to the table. And I've been so honored by the hundreds of you that have already been supportive of this campaign with your time and your resources and your encouragement. And so for those of you who have yet to get involved, have yet to make a decision, I want to ask for your vote on February 19th. I want to encourage you to go to mocheeks.com to learn more and to get engaged. Thank you again for coming out this evening. Thank you all. Thank you, Shabnam.
Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. everyone for coming and for sticking through this. We have 6 phenomenal candidates. We wanted to give each of them equal time to present themselves. We also had 12 co-sponsoring organizations, each with very important issues. Thank you guys for coming. This concludes our forum. They will be available if you have any additional questions.